Award-winning programming from the Fairfax Network is available at our video store at www.fcps.edu/Fairfax Network or call 1-800-233-3277.
Following program is a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools. Funded in part by the Virginia Satellite Educational Network.
Welcome to the MTA studio. My name is Della Kidd, and joining me today is award-winning author Janet Taylor Lyle. She'll be sharing her ideas about the writing process and talking about her books. Janet's first children's novel, The Dancing Cats of Applesap, was published in 1984. Since then, she's received a Newbery Honor for her book, Afternoon of the Elves, and has won the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction, The Art of Keeping Cool. Janet's most recent book is called Black Duck. So, if you like stories full of mystery, adventure, fact, and fiction, then you've come to the right place. Janet, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Della. I'm so excited to be here. And hello, everybody out there. It's a real pleasure to be sitting here and speaking to you out across the country.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a great show planned for today. This is a live presentation, and in just a few minutes, we're going to open up our phone lines to welcome your questions. Our number nationally is 1-800-231-6359. If you're calling us locally, you may reach us at 703-978-1636. Janet, students from all over the country have been sending us questions via email, so let's get started with one of those questions.
Great.
This is from Jasmine, who attends Southern Oaks Middle School in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And she writes, Dear Ms. Lyle, are your books about your life? And when did you think writing was what you wanted to do?
Well, they are about my life. Of course, when you write any story, inevitably you put yourself sort of in a hidden way at the center of it. But they're also not about my life because I write fiction. And fiction, in a way, is like looking into a broken mirror of your life. Everything is a little bit rearranged. You transmute from your life. Mm-hmm. And what was the second part of your question?
She also wanted to know, when did you think writing was what you were going to want to do?
Oh, yes. When I was a small child, I loved to read. And I think that I almost knew at a very early age, and maybe writers do know.
We're looking at a picture now of you when you
there
were
I
a
am,
very
when
early
I'm
age.
5 or 6 years old. That's right. I think I even knew back then that, not that I wanted to be a writer, but that I could write and that I wanted to tell stories. We writers identify ourselves very early, and maybe part of it is that we love to read so much. This is a picture of my mother with our large family. I had 4 younger brothers, I'm the oldest, reading to us, a thing she did every single night. It was something we all loved, and all of us really have a great high regard for reading and for literature. I was the only one who became a writer, though.
And you mentioned that you wrote at a very early age. Can you tell us about how that came to be? Did you publish some books?
No, of course not. I was much too shy to do that. I was a very shy child, actually. But in my room, while no one was looking, I began to publish write what I called my secret stories. Mm-hmm. They were stories that I didn't want anyone else to read because I knew that my spelling was very bad, and I didn't know a whole lot about paragraphs either. But I began to write the stories. This is a picture of a cover of one of them. I published them between pieces of my father's shirt cardboard. They came home from the cleaners, and I took them over.
And we're very lucky because you happened to bring along that actual book that we're looking at right now. Will you share it with us?
Absolutely. This is a book that my mother saved when she found it in my closet long after I'd left home. McGinnis and the teddy bear, who was my teddy bear at the time. I was in the 4th grade, I think, when I wrote this. And his expedition through the house, now very faded, but this is the cover of the book. I had read enough so that I knew in the 4th grade, as everyone does, that books have title pages, and there's my name, J.J. Taylor, which was my name in the old days. And I started out bravely. Chapter 1, I said, McGinnis. McGinnis, McGinnis, where are you hiding? And I began to write a story that had a lot to do with me actually getting into trouble all the time. This is a bear who gets into trouble around the house and is reprimanded or is caught with its fingers, its paws in the pudding and this kind of thing. I also illustrated these books too. I was never a very good illustrator. I couldn't draw, and I still don't illustrate for my own books. Always, I have someone. If the books have have illustrations, I have someone who the publishing company picks to illustrate. But I was very much a word person even back then.
Well, it's wonderful that you still have the book, and I think what you mentioned about spelling is very important, that a lot of us are not good spellers, but don't let that make you afraid of writing down your good ideas, because you can clean up the spelling later. Get
so
those
true.
ideas on paper.
That was so true, and I think that was what was happening in my classes.
Yeah.
My teachers were telling me that you know, you have good ideas, but the production is not great, and you need to work on that. And I always had a very thin skin as a writer. Even now, I don't like to get critiques on my books. I get hurt by that, and I think that was one of the reasons why I went into my room and wrote what I call my secret stories. And
you were a writer at an early age, and as you became older, you also went into, I believe, journalism. Is that correct?
I did. Well, after college, I decided this was something I really would be good at. I always could write good essays in college. I never could take true and false questions or any of those kind of tests, but afterwards I did go to journalism school, and that was a revelation for me. I was a very shy person, and it also taught me how to do interviews like this, Della. I didn't know how to really talk to people very well, but I learned from journalism not only how to write cleanly and fast and how to edit myself as well, but also how to be a person who could deal with the public a little bit more.
Well, we had a lot of great pictures there, and we also have some great emails that I'd like to share with you as well. This one is from Muhammad, and he writes, "Did you become a children's author because you like children to read, or is it because you enjoy sharing your knowledge of reading to the world?"
Oh, it's definitely the latter. Yeah, I do want children to read. I mean, it's a great thing, but the reason I became a writer is because I loved reading so much, and I think it is when we kind of lose ourselves in books, and they sort of boil over their sides into our real lives, and we become lost in them, and all of you who are good readers know who you are as well. You get lost in stories the same way I do. It's right then that you want to write your own story. I mean, you want to make up all that stuff, and you want to have your imagination, you know, made into words as well. So.
Well, you know, speaking of sharing your knowledge with the world, I've heard that your Newbery Honor book, Afternoon of the Elves, has been published in multiple languages. We've got some pictures of the covers here to prove it. Tell us about that. How exciting that must be for an author.
It really is exciting to think that a book that you've written in English has gone around the world and is being read by children there in Germany, in Spain, in Japan as well. The story is the same, of course. The translations are always identical. They come out sounding the same in people's as they read them, but every language is different. And in Japanese, of course, the book actually opens from a different direction, and the script runs down the page and says, oh, it's a wonderful thing to think that children all over this world can read my story, even if it's not in English.
That must be very gratifying.
Yeah.
Well, right now we're going to hear what our student reporter, Kelsey Price, has to say about Janet's novel, The Art of Keeping Cool. And when we return, we'll find out how big guns, small towns, and military dads inspired Janet to write this award-winning book.
For my summer reading assignment, I chose The Art of Keeping Cool by Janet Taylor Lyle. For my book project, I'm making a brochure, which includes the title, setting, main characters, summary, and a quote from the book. This story takes place in March 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor in Sachem's Head, Rhode Island. Robert's life is going all wrong. His father is working as a bomber pilot over in London, and his mother has no hired help on the farm because of the World War II drafts. Now, Robert and his family have to move to Sachem's Head, Rhode Island. During his stay, Robert and his cousin Elliot meet Abel Hoffman, a famous painter from Germany. As America grows deeper into World War II, the townspeople grow more hostile towards Abel every day. Only Robert and Elliot know the real truth about Abel, but will they try and help him? This book really kept me in suspense, and it's a great read for students who enjoy historical fiction.
Great, Kayla.
Kelsey wrote a great student review for you.
Absolutely. That's the kind of criticism I like to get.
Absolutely. But you mentioned earlier that criticism also hurts your feelings. You might be a little thin-skinned. Of course, none of us like to have negative things said about us. How do you feel when you read a review, a formal review, that maybe is not as positive as you would like, or that makes you not as happy as you could be?
Yeah, I am upset, and I go back and read my own book and think, is that really true? And then I realize, actually, that there are many people in this world, and people are going to read your book differently. And if you're out in the public and you are someone who is writing for the public, then you just have to take those slings and arrows. That's something that you need to be able to deal with, and to go on and write the next book and not worry about it.
Certainly never give up.
Yeah.
What do you believe are the elements of a good, solid review of a book?
Wow. Well, I think that really one of the best things that can be said about my books is that they have a great voice, a live voice. That is, the plot is good, it's exciting, and their adventures and so forth, but that the characters come alive on the page, and that the story itself is told with, pizzazz and fun.
Yeah.
That's what fiction is, if you ask me. It really is how the story is told. There's so many old stories, and many times we're just telling the same old story over again, but it's the voice of the characters or the voice of the author that brings a fictional story alive.
Let's go on to another email question. This comes from Natasha, and she is from St. Lucie West Middle School in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And she writes, what gave you the inspiration to write The Art of Keeping Cool? Did you or your family have any personal experiences during World War II?
Well, the answer is very much yes, absolutely. My father was, in fact, a bomber pilot during World War II. And he flew B-17 Flying Fortresses.
Is this your dad?
And there's my dad, yeah, as a young guy. He was very, very young, as a lot of soldiers were who was sent over then, just as the soldiers are who are being sent to Iraq now. It was the same kind of situation. And he had a lot of difficult experiences over there, and when he came back, he never wanted to talk to us about that. There's his plane, in fact. He in fact had a little bit of post-traumatic stress syndrome too, so he didn't, he especially wanted to keep undercover about those experiences. But we, as his children, my 4 younger brothers and I, wanted to know about the war. So partly this book is, I wrote it because I really wanted to be in touch with him. He had died by the time I started it, so there was no input from him, but I really cared to make contact with him through the pilot, who is the character, Robert's father in the story. He's the father is a very important part of this story, and a lot of my father is in him.
That must be very special to your family. This email question is from Alicia, and she writes, Dear Ms. Lyle, are all the things that happened in The Art of Keeping Cool real, or only some of them?
No, of course, when you write fiction, you change everything around. And I think if my family did find a book that I'd written that was real all the way through, they'd probably want to hang me up to dry, because you always want to have a curtain of
you don't want to share everything.
Something that's right, in front of what's real. And that's what really fiction is. But in a very strange way, the way fiction works is you can make things realer by making it fictional, because you can go right to the point of what it is and write a story that is right directly about that subject, such as war or truth or honor, that you couldn't write about a real life. So that's one of the reasons I love to write in it. In fact, this is this is a story of this is a picture of one of the big guns that came down the road into my town of Little Compton. That was another real impetus to write the story. Here it is, rounding the corner of Tiverton. These are guns that I didn't even know came in during World War II. But when I saw these pictures, I realized that people who even were not in the war, people on this side of the U.S., of the Atlantic, were also very much part of it, that we were setting up a system of guarding the coast, and these guns actually looked out over the coast, over the beaches, to protect our coast from the Nazi subs that were coming over. This, in fact, is a photo that I used, as I did some of the other photos, directly in the book. This is what Robert and Elliot would have seen when they came up over the embankment and looked to see the big guns over their heads. This is the gun that made Robert so terrified that he didn't want to move, and Robert had to help him through that.
Yes, just seeing those guns coming down your main street would be very frightening.
And that was actually that's the
Yeah.
opening scene of the book is the big guns coming into town, which is something I never saw with my eyes, but I took the pictures, the research that I did, and I made it into the first chapter of the story.
Our next email question comes from students at Southern Oaks Middle School in Florida, and they're wondering, how long does it take you to plan a story, and what kind of research do you do when you write a book that is historical fiction?
Well, every book is completely different. Every book starts in a different way, too. Sometimes it starts with something that somebody says, or sometimes it starts with a photo, the way the big guns did, or with a memory of my father's, or the way Black Duck did. So I plan a story really. It can take up to a year. In fact, even when I'm writing the story, I don't know the end of it. I'm not one of these people who makes outlines. Every day I sit down at my desk, and that's the exciting thing about writing. Fiction, especially, something new will come out. And I didn't expect it to go there. I turn a strange corner, and all of a sudden a new avenue, a new plot can open up to me. So what was the second part of the question?
Well, they wanted to know how long it takes to plan, as well as what kind of research. Do you go to the local museums, internet, what kinds
Especially for historical fiction works that are based on the past. I go to the local historical society in my town, since many of the books really are rooted in Little Compton, Rhode Island, where I have lived most of my life. But I also go on the internet. My gosh, the internet is a fantastic thing. We can all sit at our desks now and call up all sorts of information. But I also get books out of the library, and also get the library to send me books too via the internet. So there's a lot of research involved, and one of the things you have to be aware of when you're writing historical fiction is not to get bogged down in the research. Do the research, know the facts, and then put it aside, because in the end, it's the story, the fictional story, and the characters that are going to carry it and make it good.
Have you ever had situations like you do in The Black Duck, where you've got an aspiring journalist that he goes and he finds someone that really lived that firsthand and interview them in person?
Well, no, I didn't have that experience with this book. I made up that scenario, actually. But I am a journalist myself, or formerly was, so I was very aware that this was something that could happen. And in fact, when I went out and began to interview people in my town about the Prohibition era for Black Duck, I realized that some of them didn't want to speak about it. This was illegal activity that was going on, and if it was in their families, they still felt very shy and very nervous about saying that their uncle or their grandfather had been involved in actually smuggling illegally.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, more book talk as we get the inside story of Janet Taylor Lyle's Black Duck. But first, it's bookmarks. Stay with us.
MTA Bookmarks.
Research is particularly important, though, for historical fiction. It is fiction, but it is indeed historical.
What I often do when I'm doing research is treat it like a mystery story.
MTA Bookmarks only on Meet the Author. Meet the author and get the full story, the backstory,
You guys are actually the first to know about this. I haven't even told my editor about this idea.
the revised story, the author's story,
You just do it. You read, you watch, and you write.
and sometimes quite a story.
Writing isn't a job. It's a way of looking at the world and meeting new people.
Meet the Author, a production of the Fairfax Network.
Welcome back. My guest today is author Janet Taylor Lyle. Do you have a question for Janet about the writing process? Come on, join the discussion. Our phone lines are open and we're ready to take your calls. Our number nationally is 1-800-231-6359. If you're calling us locally, you may reach us at 703-978-1636. Janet, we've got more email questions to share with you about your latest book, Black Duck. This question comes from Kristen, and she writes, Dear Ms. Lyle, I love your book. It was amazing. Is Black Duck a true story? Did it happen to you or someone you know?
Well, it didn't happen to me, and it didn't happen to someone I know. But in a way, it is a true story, because the Black Duck was a real rum-running boat during Prohibition that smuggled thousands of cases of liquor into Rhode Island shores. And that's a great picture of Rhode Island right there. You can see why Rhode Island shores were so good for smuggling, because they were all full of little crooks and crannies and inlets so that the smugglers could hide from the Prohibition agents. But the Black Duck, the things that happened to the Black Duck in my book actually did also happen in real life. So from that point of view, it's based on history, but I fictionalized it because I put characters in there who are not real.
And what are we looking at now?
And this is in fact a picture of what the black duck might have looked like a little bit. It's a rum-running boat, and on shore there, what are those? Those are men who are watching it, I think being apprehended by the Coast Guard, I suspect. This was a time when there was so much smuggling going on that it really, the Coast Guard couldn't keep track of it all. And there was a lot of, in fact, there's a Coast Guard vessel too, one of the 75-footers, a huge boat for tracking some of these smaller smuggling boats that were run by farmers, local fishermen, and part of the reason they were involved in smuggling is because it made so much money for them. They really didn't, as fishermen, hadn't made very much, and this was a kind of way they could make money to tide their families over. And communities along the coast were very much involved in it. Many, many otherwise honest people were smugglers, in fact.
Well, and Rhode Island was one of the few states against ratifying the amendment, right?
And of course, it never did ratify the amendment. Connecticut and Rhode Island were the only two that never ratified. Rhode Island's very, very independent souls. They've always been sort of digging in their heels against government and the laws the government put over the land. So,
well, there may be some viewers who have not read Black Duck yet. Could you give us an overview of the story?
Yeah, in 1929, this was a rum-running boat that had been running for about 4 or 5 years along the shore, and with impunity. No one could catch the Black Duck. There was just a sort of Robin Hood-like vessel. But late one night, unfortunately, this wonderful story came to an end. December 29th, in a fog bank, in the middle of the night, the Coast Guard, which had moored on a bell buoy off the coast of Newport, from a tip, I think they got a tip that the Black Duck was coming in, came across, and the Black Duck came in, and the Coast Guard didn't really give them time to stop or even be searched, which was the law of the land also, because these smugglers didn't carry weapons. What the Coast Guard did is they opened up and they basically assassinated the crew. They killed all three men, and the fourth one they shot through the hand. And it made huge ripples up and down the coast because the locals, of course, were on the side of the smugglers. They were making a living off this illegal liquor.
I'm going to stop you there for a moment. We have a call. Her name is Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. What is your question today for Janet?
Hi, yes. I was curious, how do you come with the titles of your book?
How do I come with the titles of my book? Well, sometimes, like The Art of Keeping Cool, they come out of the body of the story. I mean, there is a phrase in there about Eliot knowing how to keep his cool in difficult situations. So sometimes and Afternoon of the Elves, the same. There is a phrase called, within the sentence, on that Afternoon of the Elves. So I lift a phrase right out. But Black Duck, for instance, I just thought that was a great name for a boat, and I thought that just having those two words on the cover of a book would say it all about what this story was about, smuggling and about the dark, and I don't know. So partly it's that I make them up because they will mean something to the story, but partly also to attract attention so that people will want to read these stories.
It's a good technique. Thanks, Jennifer, for calling. I noticed that the Black Duck begins with a newspaper article. We have a picture of it here. Is this from a real newspaper article?
Well, it's not. I rewrote this article, although a lot of my research was based on old newspaper articles about the real Black Duck killing that took place. And this is kind of a rewrite of that, one of those early articles. I knew how to do it, of course, because of my years in journalism. It was very easy for me to rewrite that story. And I knew how to make a headline, too. There's a whole trick to making a headline. So it's, I had to rewrite them because the plot, the way the plot works, I couldn't use the actual articles. I needed to put things in the newspaper article that would have to do with my plot and with the schedule of events as well. So.
And you put things in the story itself. And originally, is it correct that the characters of David and Mr. Hart were not originally in the story, and you put them in there? Why?
That's right. Yeah, but originally I wrote this story just as a straight kind of thriller adventure story. But I got about 3/4 of the way through, and I couldn't go any further. I ran into this sort of black hole. And I think all writers know these places where you suddenly just break down and you can't go forward. And it usually means that something is wrong with your book. Something is wrong with your plot, and you have to go back and figure out what it was. Well, when I went back, I figured out that this story needed more depth. It needed perspective. It needed someone who was in a modern age looking back at the earlier age so that they could see sort of the moral problems, the fog that engulfed that area. And that was when I introduced my character David, and also the old Reuben Hart, who just won my heart.
Yeah.
I love that old guy.
He was quite a character.
Yeah.
Let's go to another email about Black Duck. This one is an interesting one because we had several students ask the same question. They'd like to know what happened to the body that washed up onto the beach. Did someone take it away, or did it wash back into the ocean?
Oh, well, obviously what happened was the rum runners who, it was actually the mob who were looking for the ticket, took that body, and who knows what they did. Maybe they dropped it off into a deeper ledge in the ocean. But the reason they picked up that body is they thought that the man who was dead had a ticket on him that was going to allow them to, if they had that ticket, take charge of the huge shipment of liquor that was coming in.
Which was quite valuable at the time.
It certainly was,
Certainly.
yeah.
Katie from Poe Middle School in Virginia has an email for you. She writes, Jetty from the Black Duck and Robert, the main character in The Art of Keeping Cool, both betray someone. Why?
Wow. It's true. I think that one of my big issues, and one of the reasons I love to write actually, is that I have an issue with truth. I don't think that just telling the truth or saying that you will tell the truth, or that the truth in general is generally something you can rely on, and that it's very easy, in fact, to betray, because truth is such a malleable thing. On one side, from one side, Jetty may be right. I mean, his father was the police chief, and he should follow the rules. But on the other side, from Robert's point of view, and also from the point of view of the fishermen who needed money in order to live during this time, that wasn't the right thing to do. So a lot of the betrayals in my stories have to do with trying to choose which way is right when neither way seems particularly right. There's no bottom line, absolute hard, fast truth or way to go.
And these are situations these boys are in that they've never been in before. It's very hard to get advice when these are new situations for everybody.
And it's a situation that we all get in from time to time as people, trying to decide what the right way to go is. Living is a very complicated thing.
Yes,
there's no one answer.
Well, we have another email. This is from Martha, and she would like to know, in the middle of the story, Marina tells Reuben that Billy is always helping people. But how? Isn't Billy a smuggler? He was also charming.
He certainly was a charmer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a charmer.
Well, what Billy Brady was doing as well was he was not keeping all of his proceeds. He was a very generous guy, even though he was smuggling illegally. And he was giving part of what he made to the poorer families around town and in Tiverton. And in fact, this has some basis in fact that members of the Black Duck who made a lot of money during their runs used to give back to their families and also to other people in the neighborhood who weren't so well off, who were still fishermen and perhaps abiding by the law. It was just a really generous thing for him to do, and it made him not quite so dark and black, I think.
He was a great character. Yeah. Well, Janet, looks like we're out of time here. It has been fascinating talking to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great for me too.
Our guest today has been author Janet Taylor Lyle. If you would like to learn more about her books, visit her website at www.janettaylorlyle.com. To learn more about our upcoming authors and the Fairfax Network, visit us at www.fcps.edu/Fairfax Network. For the Fairfax Network, I'm Della Kidd. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming.